And I'm going to sit and make sure it's recording. It looks like it's recording. Okay, I think we're recording. All right, so talking about classes again. Now, before I get started, I'm going to tell you that this is going to be kind of an infuriating session because it's going to fly in the face of everything I've told you about classes so far. Are you ready for this? So here's what's going to happen. We've got every class has properties. We're just going to kind of summarize this, right? Every class has properties and methods, and those properties and methods get instantiated when you instantiate a version of the class. And you can have multiple instantiations in a single script, right? And they all manage their own data. You guys know this because you've written a few of those. Now, the problem we have in one of the classes is to be able to get the instantiation data from one the property data from one instantiation into another instantiation. Is that correct? Right. So, in other words, we've got backup DB and restore DB, right? And what we need is a property from this one to be able to be read from this one, right? Which is, a lot harder because you need to actually, do that kind of thing. So we've got a concept here known as static properties and static methods. And what that means is that when you define something as static, it doesn't, how do I put this? It's not relegated to an individual instance of a class, but to the class structure itself. So in other words, it's available to all classes. I mean, to all instantiations. So, and the thing is since it belongs to, we'll call it the class definition. Okay. So since it belongs to the class definition, you don't actually instantiate the class in order to use it. Let's just look at a quick example. Okay. So here I've got a server name string as a property, and I am going to put both of these guys up. So I've instantiated two instances, one for backup and one for restore. And then I'm going to call backup server DB. And then I'm going to instantiate dest. And I'm going to call the same server name and restore DB. So if I run this guy, so I've got source and I've got dest, right? But what if I want to do something with source from the backup, right? So let's say I want a source server to be available across all of my guys. And the whole point of all of this, right, is so that, I mean, one of the things that makes classes so attractive is the fact that you can use these named variables to keep track of what you're doing, right? So if we were to just say like, backup restore DB operation, that wouldn't tell us anything, right? And so you have to keep changing, you have to keep switching the server name back and forth, right? Because that's what you're doing now, right? You're switching it back and forth. And there's nothing wrong with that. There really isn't. It's a fine solution. But if I don't want to keep switching server name back and forth, and I don't want to have to keep setting it for every instantiation, right? Then I will set what's known as a static property. And I'm going to call it source server. And inside the DB refresh, I'm going to set, actually, I'm setting server name here. So I don't want to do that. I want to set, right now, I'm just going to say this. Actually, I'll show you that in a second. Sorry, I'll show you that in a second. So here, in order to call a static property, you do it the same way that you do here, right? So you notice how I'm setting this equal to this instantiation, right, of new. And new is a method that comes along for free that just, it's a .NET thing that says, build this whole class structure and then give me an instantiation of it, right? Give me a version of it. But I can take this whole thing right here, the same thing, and say, you know what? Since I'm calling the class declaration here and calling this built-in new method, then I can call this class and this class definition, and I can use that to call a static property and set a static property. So rather than having to say, backup DB dot, you use this construct the same way as you do when you create a new instance of the class, and then you can set it and then you can call it as well. So let's go ahead and undo this one. And so now I've got this guy here, and if I run it, I come back here and I get my static source. And that static source can be used. So here I've got restore DB. I'll go ahead and uncheck it. So I've got get source server, and that's this method right here. So get source server just returns a string, and it shows you that it's inside the method, and it calls this static property here. So now let's go ahead and run this guy and inside source. So you can see I can access this from within an instantiation of a class, which is right here. And a really cool thing about these guys is that when you have static properties, it doesn't really instantiate the entire class, right? It doesn't have to. So when I instantiate this guy, it loads the whole thing into memory. So if this is a 35,000 line class, it puts the whole thing in memory, right? And it instantiates the entire thing because you're asking for a blueprint, or you're asking for an instance of the entire blueprint. When I do this, it instantiates this. So it just goes into the class, grabs it, and then gives you back that static data. And again, you can have static methods as well that you can call across all of the guys. And see this guy right here, you just define it with the word static. You just define it with the word static, and you automatically get all this functionality. So that is the solution I thought of the other day and couldn't remember until yesterday. So I decided to code it up while it was still fresh on my mind. Questions, comments, oohs and ahs. Madness at being told that classes instantiate and now being told that they don't necessarily have to.
Yeah, definitely get the advantage of it, rather than loading the whole class into the memory. But if the class is small and we are just changing the property of the class instantiated, then it is as same as this one. We can definitely use it wherever required then.
Now, there are a couple caveats here, right? They must be self-contained. They can't reference any other properties or methods, right? So, you can't set this static property equal to, this property plus another property, right? It's got to be standalone, because that would, since this one's not static, then that would require you to instantiate an instance of the class, right? And that's not what this is all about. So just know that when you do this, they have to be
Yeah.
self-contained. And I like to think of it as a way to pass data between instantiations, because that's kind of what it is, right? It's kind of a little temp table, right, for all of your instantiations. You can keep stuff in there that all of them are going to need, that you don't want to have to like instantiate every class and keep it and keep it and instantiate blah, 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 sorry, and set those values for every single instantiation, right? So a good example of that. Now this, it's a good example in theory, but it's not a good example in practice, right? But to get the point, so like every time we instantiate our DB refresh class, we pass it in the username, password, server name, database name, all that, right? Well, if you were guaranteed you were going to connect to the same one every single time or most of the time, then you've got two ways to do that, right? You could set them in your constructor. You could set the properties in your constructor, or you could make them static properties so that whenever you do it, it's going to be set. That's two ways to do the same thing, but the difference being that, let's say I've got 5 database connections open, right? When I change it through the property, it's going to change it for that instantiation. If I change it through a static property, it's going to change it for all of them, right? If they're all looking at that, if they're all pointed to that static property for the server name, then it'll change it for every single one of them. So it's a handy little tool to have, but so you should know about it, but know what you're doing and know what you're getting yourself into. And but yeah, it'll get you out of a mess every now and then, and it's a pretty elegant solution, I think. I really like the whole the static concept of being able to have something that's going to go across all instances no matter what. So anyway, there you go. It's kind of a little temp table for you. If there are no questions, I'll go ahead and turn off the recording.
Yeah, there is one question.
Sure.
Yeah, when we define the method, can you go down a little bit? There was one method to set that static property, right? Yeah, get source server.
Oh, this one?
Yeah. So if we want to call this method, we will again need the instantiation, right?
Yes. Because this method is not static. It's just calling a static property.
Right. Okay. And the below method, which is static, we can how we are going to call that without instantiation?
You would call that the same way. So right here in 49. Here, I'll even move that up for you. See, it's the same syntax as this one, right?
I'm talking about the static method.
Yeah, I'm saying if this were a static method, you would call it like this. You asked me how to call this one. So here, I'll do this for you. There you go. So now it's just like that.
Okay.
So again, you notice how we've got this little built-in method, right? That tells .NET what to do, right? Tells it to instantiate a version of this class and give it its own memory space and all that stuff, right? kind of like a temp table, right? And so you've got this. Clearly, you can't call an instance of this method, of this class, because we haven't created it yet.
Yes.
So we have to call it with the double : syntax and then the method after that. And you notice how here, even though we may have an instance of this class, we don't need to instantiate it in order to call the static method. So it gets the exact same syntax. It makes sense if you think about it.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Cool. All right, I'm going to turn off the recording now.